Hello from the Channel studio in London and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the programme that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Oyetayo. On the programme this week, junior doctors in the United Kingdom strike for the second time this year over pay, plus 25-year-old gunman kills 5 people in a bank shooting in the United States. We'll begin in the United Kingdom, where junior doctors have staged a 4-day walkout over pay, leaving up to 250,000 appointments postponed. The tens of thousands of junior doctors, qualified physicians, who make up nearly half of the medical workforce, are striking for pay rises better aligned with inflation. It's the latest disruption to affect the state-funded National Health Service.
I really want to stay. Just give us fair pay.
Singing "We Just Want Fair Pay." Junior doctors in Britain this week embarked on a 4-day strike across the country. The British Medical Association, the union representing doctors, wants a 35% pay rise, arguing that members have suffered a 26% real terms cut in pay over 15 years. Some junior doctors say the situation is so bad they are thinking of leaving the profession or moving to other countries.
So I think there's two strands to it. I think it's really important for doctors because our pay has been decreased by 25% in the past 15 years, and that's no worker should have to take that home. Especially when we're doing a high-pressure job, we work anti-social hours, making high-pressure decisions. So I think, and there's a real risk of a workforce crisis, which is already happening with people moving to other countries where the pay and conditions are just better than they are in the UK now. So I think even though it's a last resort for me personally to leave the UK, because I really believe in the NHS, I really want to work in it. I believe in healthcare that's free and equal for everyone. But if things keep on getting worse, I think some of us even more of us will start thinking about leaving the country.
The BMA union says the 35% pay rise would make up for 15 years of below inflation wage rises, but the government says it's unrealistic.
Well, we want to reach a fair and reasonable settlement with junior doctors. We recognise the hugely important role that they play within the NHS. That's why we stand ready to have meaningful and constructive talks with them, as we have had with other health unions, as we have in terms of responding at the budget to concerns from doctors regarding their pensions. So we are ready to have discussions with them, but clearly a demand for 35%, over £20,000 for some junior doctors is not fair or reasonable, and that is why we've not been able to make progress so far. But we want to engage constructively. We recognise junior doctors have been under significant pressure, particularly from the pandemic, and we want to work with them to find a fair and reasonable settlement.
The British Health Minister also accused organisers of timing the strike just after the bank holiday Easter weekend, a period when the NHS already faces increased demand and greater staff absence to maximise disruption.
I deeply regret these strikes, and in particular the timing, which have been timed deliberately coming straight after Easter. The fact that the BMA junior doctors have asked their members not to tell NHS managers whether they intended to go on strike or not, making contingency planning more difficult, and also their refusal to agree any national exemptions. Other health unions like the Royal College of Nurses agreed national exemptions, particularly, for example, for cancer patients, so that those patients weren't impacted. The Junior Doctors Committee has refused any national exemptions, and obviously that puts patients at greater risk. But we're working very hard to mitigate those impacts.
The strike is the latest to involve NHS staff, following walkouts by nurses, paramedics and others demanding rises that better reflect annual inflation running at more than 10%. It comes as the NHS experiences one of its most severe crises in its 75-year history, overwhelmed with some 7 million patients waiting for hospital treatment, severely affecting areas such as cardiovascular care.
The government must realize that they're working for the people. And these nurses and doctors in this establishment, a dynamic establishment, should be recompensed to a degree what they are worth.
I'm for it, and I think they do deserve to get their pay. They're helping people stay alive, and they do hours that most of us wouldn't even do.
NHS England said the latest strike will put pressure on hospitals and urge people to use health services wisely this week. Junior doctors previously staged a walkout on the 13th to 15th of March, which led to 175,000 outpatient appointments and operations being rescheduled. Despite recent terror and rocket attacks, judicial overhaul protests in Israel continue for a 14th consecutive week. Since the start of the year, huge weekly protests have been held by people opposed to the government's reform plans. The scale of the protests has escalated, with hundreds of thousands of people packing the streets in Tel Aviv and other towns and cities across the country.
Chanting slogans, hundreds of Israeli protesters blocked roads in Tel Aviv. The protesters, who have been staging weekly demonstrations over Israel's judiciary overhaul and other government policies, accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of blaming the opposition and demonstrators for being responsible for recent security issues. The latest in a series of protests against the plans, which were paused last month in the face of a wave of strikes and mass demonstrations, come as Israel faces a sharp rise in tensions on several fronts during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Israelis are on edge after a car ramming in Tel Aviv on Friday that killed an Italian man and wounded 5 other tourists, hours after a gun attack killed 2 Israeli sisters and wounded their mother near a settlement in the occupied West Bank.
As for the security problems, we've been seeing for the past couple of days that there have been many terrorist attacks, and we've been hearing many calls not to come here tonight. When, as a matter of fact, we don't see that as contradictory to the political problems that we have. I mean, the security is one thing, but the reform is another, and they might try to use this to take advantage of us and try to bring these strikes to a close, but we're not going to let them, and we're still going to come here and say that, loud and clear that we will not let this reform pass.
Women are standing still tonight in a memory of those who were murdered, in the hope for the sake of those who were injured and for those who are being bombed all around Israel. We are here because we have to keep fighting for our equal rights. Without equal rights for women, there is no democracy. So we're here tonight as well.
It comes after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu delivered a televised speech regarding the national security situation. The Prime Minister said he would leave Defence Minister Yoav Gallant in place given an escalating security crisis, reversing a decision to fire the minister that triggered protests and raised alarm abroad. He added that the two had resolved their disagreement over Gallant's public call last month for a halt to the government's bitterly divisive judicial overhaul plan, which Gallant said had become a threat to Israel's security. The proposals, which would give the government effective control over the appointment of Supreme Court judges and allow Parliament to overrule many decisions of the court, have caused one of the biggest domestic crises in Israel's recent history. The government side, which accuses activist judges of increasingly usurping the role of Parliament, says the overhaul is needed to restore a proper balance between the judiciary and elected politicians. Critics say it will remove some of the vital checks and balances underpinning a democratic state and hand unchecked power to the government.
Over in the United States, another mass shooting has left a community in Kentucky in mourning. In the latest gun violence to hit the country, 5 people were killed after a 25-year-old bank employee opened fire at his workplace. The shooting has once again renewed calls for gun control legislation in the United States.
The bank employee, armed with a rifle, shot and killed 5 colleagues and wounded 9 other people at his workplace while live streaming the attack in downtown Louisville, Kentucky on Monday.
He just started shooting.
Describe that again, everything that you saw.
He just started he had a long assault rifle, and you hear the shots just start firing.
What did he look like?
I didn't see his face.
Were you in a meeting?
Yeah, we were in the back conference room. Whoever's next to me got shot and hit bloods on me from it.
Yeah, I was in the elevator. I just walked right past the conference room where everyone was. And then I came down and I had to grab something, and then on my way back up to the elevator, I just hear this loud, I thought there was like something like dropping because they were doing some construction or some renovations in there, and
Yeah,
I got up there and the guy was like, run, there's a shooter. I was like...
Police identified the shooter as 23-year-old Connor Sturgeon, who joined the downtown branch of the Old National Bank as a full-time employee last year.
We have learned that the suspect in this incident was a current employee with Old National Bank. We have also learned that he purchased the weapon used in this tragic incident. He purchased the weapon legally from one of the local dealerships here in Louisville. We have executed a search warrant on his residence, and we have recovered items, and we cannot get into specific details on what we recover at this time because, again, the investigation is ongoing, and we want to make sure that we're providing accurate information. The family deserves that, and the community deserves that. But we do know that this was targeted. He knew those individuals, of course, because he worked there. And the evil that was played out on yesterday, taking those lives and injuring so many others, just truly unfortunate.
Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, on the verge of tears, said during a news briefing that he knew some of the victims, including Elliot, a senior vice president at the bank.
This is awful. I have a very close friend that didn't make it today. And I have another close friend who didn't either, and one who's at the hospital that I hope is going to make it through. So when we talk about praying, I hope people will. For those that we are hoping can make it through the surgeries that they're going through, and then we've got to do what we have done these last 3 years after everything. We've got to wrap our arms around these families. I do believe that this is a safe community with officers doing their very best each and every day, and that's what we saw here. Yes, I know that there are steps that the police department is taking to do things better after a recent report, but we certainly saw, I think, the very best from them today, and I want to thank them and all our other law enforcement officers for responding and doing their best to try to save some of my friends and many others.
This is the latest in a long series of mass shootings in the United States. According to US media, the shooter had recently been told by the bank that he was going to be fired and had written a note describing his plans for the mass shooting before going to work on Monday. Kentucky is one of 26 states that allow most adults over 21 years old to purchase and carry a firearm without a license.
And people say I'm tired, but I'll be answered. It's more than tired. I'm weary. There's only so many times you can walk into a room and tell someone they're not coming home tomorrow. And it just breaks your heart. When you hear someone screaming, "Mommy," or "Daddy," it just becomes too hard day in and day out to be able to do that. Now, my team is fantastic. They're absolute professionals and they're wonderful. But sooner or later, it catches up to everybody. You just can't keep doing what we're doing, because you just can't keep seeing these lives lost. You can't keep seeing all the people with these horrific injuries coming through the door.
So please change our state law to let Louisville make its own decisions about reducing the amount of illegal guns on our streets and gun violence that is killing far too many people in mass shootings, in individual shootings, in any shootings. Let me be clear. I don't care about finger pointing. I don't care about blame. I don't care about politics. I'm only interested in working together with our state legislators to take meaningful action, to save lives.
In response to the Louisville bank attack, President Joe Biden once again reiterated his wish that Congress pass legislation requiring safe storage of firearms, background checks for all gun sales, and elimination of gun manufacturers' immunity from liability.
Today we saw another senseless act of gun violence, killed
at least 4 Americans and injured at least 8 others, this time in Louisville, Kentucky. The President and the First Lady are praying for those killed and injured in the tragic shooting in Louisville and for the survivors who will carry the trauma for the rest of their lives. They are grateful for the LMPD officers who quickly and courageously stepped into the line of fire to save others. Once again, today, the President has called on Republicans in Congress to work together with Democrats to take action, to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, to require safe storage of firearms, to require background checks for all gun sales, to eliminate gun manufacturers' immunity from liability. These are common sense actions we can ask for and should be getting right now.
Mass shootings have become commonplace in the US. Data compiled by the Gun Violence Archive show there have been at least 146 mass shootings so far this year.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, we bring you the highlights from the inaugural annual lecture of the Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation in South Africa. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us on the program. Servant leadership, courage under fire, and the path of moral values were the focus of the inaugural annual lecture of the Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation, which was held in Durban, South Africa. To do the honors as the very first speaker was his longtime friend and former president of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, who spoke about the key aspects of Prince Buthelezi's legacy. The South African political icon, who may be described as controversial at certain points in his country's history, turns 95 this year and says he's glad that he and other fighters like Chief Obasanjo and Dr. Kaunda have played their part in the fight against injustice. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, has more.
It was a full house filled with lessons in history, culture and brotherhood across borders as members of the public and great leaders converged on the Durban Convention Center for the inaugural Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi annual lecture. Delivering the lecture was Nigeria's former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, who refers to Prince Buthelezi as my dear senior brother. He went back many decades to the anti-apartheid struggle era and several ways and times they worked together against a common enemy.
Prince Buthelezi, by serving in the government of national unity, was key to contributing to South Africa's expectations for peace. We must do more to promote such actions on the continent. I believe that if more leaders in Africa had the strength and foresight of Prince Buthelezi, then Africa might be able to free itself of the shackles of conflict. Then we will be able to silence the gun.
Chief Obasanjo also commended the prince, who turns 95 in August this year, for his role in preserving the Zulu monarchy and managing 2 major royal transitions as the AmaZulu Prime Minister. A very grateful King Misuzulu Kazolitini, the current Zulu king, commended the traditional Prime Minister, who solidly stood by him as he battled siblings to ascend the throne of his father. He, however, said he had one last task for him.
One last important task, Ndabezitha, as Prime Minister to the Zulu nation. I instruct you, Ndabezitha, to organize a meeting of elders, while on my side I will organize a meeting of the youth. We would like, since God has blessed us with you till this time, to contribute to this cause, where the youth will put together with the elders to determine the future of the Zulu nation.
Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi didn't speak for long, but had many glowing words for the guest speaker.
I'm humbled to know that we, Dr. Obasanjo, Dr. Kaunda and I, have done our part to push back this darkness and see that the sun rises again. I shall never forget for whatever is left of my life. What he said here today is exactly what needs to be said, what we need to hear in Africa. Let us take heed and consider how South Africa might benefit from the renewed perspective that we have been offered today.
The very first set of the Ubuntu Butu Awards of the Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation were presented to the Prince, here honored by the chairman and president of the Inkatha Freedom Party, Onmo Velenkosini Hlabisa, as well as the former president Obasanjo, and posthumously to the late Dr. Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, received by his son, Ambassador Panji Kaunda. The awards were for extensive work for the good of humanity.
Well, God's honor is the best. But are you doing something that you are making where you are better? You are making people feel that their life is being enhanced, their position is improving as a result of your contribution. And I think that is what matters. And if in you doing that, it is being appreciated, then it's good.
The Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation hopes to preserve the legacy of the Prince, and with a 13-point objective, intends to work to promote the virtues of nation building, constitutionalism, justice, and inclusiveness.
And still in South Africa, catch and develop them young. That's the theme of a sports fun day at the Diepsloot Informal Settlement near Johannesburg, where the Early Childhood Development Cluster in South Africa hosted underprivileged children during the Easter holidays. Present were also owners of early learning centers as well as caregivers who used the opportunity to appeal for more government funding for the educational sector. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, was there and now reports.
Children living in Diepsloot Informal Settlement in Johannesburg often face a range of challenges that can hinder their development, including poor access to education, limited opportunities for play and socialization, and exposure to violence and crime. However, a recent event in Diepsloot Informal Settlement aimed to tackle some of these issues and promote positive and child development and community spirit.
Yes, it is early childhood development, but remember, we are under a Department of Education now, and physical education is part of the curriculum, especially for foundation level.
Some caregivers emphasize the importance of early childhood development and challenges facing their informal settlement daycare centers.
We actually have quite a lot of challenges because as we are in informal settlement, whereby we don't have a land. We do have a land which might be temporary, but we don't have the title deed.
Raven Gaunda from South African School of Excellence spoke about the role that sports can play in promoting physical and social skills, as well as fostering a sense of community pride and identity.
We focus on developing the kids' gross motor skills. So we're currently working in all the informal settlements, and together with Tlali, we're trying to get the kids active.
Raven believed that the government can do more to support early childhood development.
Number one, no, they're not doing enough, and they could do more. But remember, in South Africa, we have many challenges, and one of the challenges is sport, especially with kids. Even if you look at our advanced sports in soccer or cricket or whatever, the development part of it is lacking. And that's where more attention needs to be put in. And it starts with these kids here.
Children from different parts of the settlement were organized into teams and took part in a range of games and activities. Parents and caregivers also joined into the fun and winners of the day.
I'm going to show
all deep sleuths, they have to know that Rotondo is number one.
Research shows that the overall budget allocated for ECD in South Africa should increase from 5 billion rands to 7 billion rands in the next 3 years. Experts say the investment in ECD would see a significant increase in the number of children in early learning programs supported by the government ECD subsidy.
I'm 100% sure that they can be able, at least when they assist with money, everything in the ECD can happen because it needs money. Without money, they need to fix things. Pipes, sometimes they burst, the bathrooms and the kitchens and everything. There is no way that they can do it without money. So with extra money that they can be put in the ECDs, everything will be fine.
According to a UNICEF report released this year, 2 out of 3 children under the age of 5 in sub-Saharan Africa are at risk of poor development outcomes. This means that far too few children are thriving due to illnesses, inadequate nutrition, stress, a lack of love and stimulation, and limited opportunities for early learning.
And that's the program today, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyola Oyetayo. Bye for now.